Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. Today I'm going to be doing a video talking about NBA head coaching and essentially why I think that NBA head coaches are, in a lot of instances, very overrated. Now, before you get really upset and you click off the video and you think I don't know what I'm talking about, I definitely think that there are some coaches that definitely do know what they're doing. I think that there's a lot of really smart, talented head coaches out there who can transform a team and make them really good, help them take the next step. But essentially, what the point of this video is that I think that there's a lot of head coaches out there who get credit for being like these great head coaches, but it might just be because they have great players, and I don't think that's anything against them. I just think it's I think people attribute the team's success to causation in that they have a great head coach instead of correlation in that they have great players. Basically, I think people will say like, "Oh, okay, just for an example, oh, Phil Jackson has 11 rings, he must be a great head coach." But they totally disregard that he had the greatest player of all time on his team for 9 years, and then after that he went to basically the next best team in the NBA, the Lakers, who had two top 10 players of all time on their team in the middle of their primes. And there's like a lot of people just be like, "Oh, Phil Jackson's a great head coach," but like, is he really? Like, I don't know. He had essentially the best player of all time, the second best shooting guard of all time, and arguably the greatest center of all time, all in their primes in different distinct eras. And then you look at when he was on the Lakers, he had Kobe Bryant still in his prime, top 10 player all time, perennial All-Star Pau Gasol, Andrew Bynum, who is a really solid center and future All-Star. You had Ron Artest, who's a former Defensive Player of the Year, former All-Star, still at the tail end of his prime, but still in his prime, I would say. And then you had Lamar Odom, Sixth Man of the Year. So you had like a really good solid team around him there. So like I don't know. I don't know if I totally like that one. He did more coaching for sure, but like he still had a very talented team. Or I guess getting into more coaches, um, who I would my main reason for this is like you look at a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers from 2014 to 18 with LeBron. They have David Blatt for the first season and a half, and then for the remaining 2.5 seasons, they have Tyronn Lue. But the thing that I look at is that, like, let's say you don't have Tyronn Lue or David Blatt coaching, you just have no head coach for that team. They probably perform basically the same as they would with a head coach because LeBron James was essentially calling a lot of the shots. Not the head coach per se, in that he was running every play, but he was making a lot of the big decisions that were going to happen on the court. And I think that that team goes on to have the same success that they did with LeBron, or with a head coach or without a head coach. They could essentially just have LeBron um, call the shots on everything, and they probably would have performed about the same. Now, I will give Tyronn Lue some credit. In the 2016 finals, he made some key adjustments, wherein he, even with Kevin Love back and healthy, he had Richard Jefferson starting for the team at the other forward slot along with LeBron instead of bringing in Kevin Love, which I think a lot of coaches would have just been like, "Oh, Kevin Love's an all-star. He should go in the starting lineup." But they didn't do that. They put in Richard Jefferson, and Tyronn Lue was strategic about that, and he had some good rotations and a few good defensive schemes. But like overall, I think even if he doesn't, the Cavs still probably get to like a game 6 of the finals. And you might say like, oh, they don't win that title without Tyronn Lue. Like, you could make that argument, but at the same time, I'd still say they get to 4 straight finals for sure. And you could possibly even say without David Blatt, they probably do the same in the 2015 finals. Probably still win like 2 games, maybe even do better. Who knows? But I just think like that's an instance where for sure like the head coach really had no impact on a team's outcome. Um, so I am going to take a lot of shots at historical head coaches here, and it's not to insult them. It's just to point out like a flaw in how I think NBA fans and media and critics think about coaching overall. So, okay, I've kind of poked my hole at Phil Jackson already. So, just to look at the Bulls' record before he got there, um, let's see here. I'm going to look at their season right before he got there in 1988 to 89. Okay, so if you don't know, Doug Collins was the coach of the Bulls before Phil Jackson came in. So you look at their record in, let's see here, 87 to 88, they won 50 games, were third in the East, and got to the second round. And then you look at their next season, which was 88 to 89, still under Doug Collins. They win 47 games, and they got to the conference finals and lost. And then you look at the next year, they win 55 games, so that's an improvement. And then they get to the conference finals and lose again, so same success in the playoffs. And then after that, you see they go on quite a stretch where they win the three straight. They do the three-peat, and then they are a second-round team for 2 years with Phil Jackson, and then they win another three-peat. So that is very impressive. I will say that for sure. But I think the thing that people don't think about is that time frame, they think like, oh, like they were not that great of a team, and then Phil Jackson comes along and they get so much better. But I guess I don't really agree with that. I think something that's key to look at in this time frame is the development of two players, which would be Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant. Okay, so like first of all, let's look at Scottie Pippen's numbers here. So under Doug Collins, he played for him for 2 years. His rookie year, he barely played much at all, 20 minutes a game. Uh, he averaged 8 points and 4 rebounds and 2 assists, so he didn't really do much on the court whatsoever. Wasn't a big part of the team. Then you see 88, 89, he actually becomes like a starter and starts playing more key minutes. He starts averaging 14 points a game, 6 rebounds, about 4 assists, 2 steals. Kind of seeing what Scottie Pippen could be. But then the next season, Phil Jackson's first season, we see Scottie, who also develops as well, just as a player. He goes up to 17 points a game, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, almost 3 steals a game, 1 block, 49% from the field, setting career highs in all of those categories. Um, and I think, like, I'm not going to say that he didn't improve at all based on Phil Jackson taking over, but I think it was more of a case of like, oh, Scottie Pippen's like finally coming into his own, and that just happens to be the same time that Phil Jackson is taking over the team. I don't think that necessarily like Phil Jackson is the reason that Scottie Pippen improved. Okay, now for Horace Grant as well. Let's see here. Um, like he's another guy who improved a little bit when Phil Jackson took over, like, but very minimally, and like he didn't. Um, like his numbers are essentially the same, going from 12 points and 9 rebounds. He went to 13 points and 8 rebounds, and his numbers stayed pretty consistent throughout his time in Chicago, right around those same numbers, like between 13 and 14 points a game and like 8 to 10 rebounds, somewhere in there. And his field goal percentage always around like 55%, somewhere in there, at least above 50. But I feel like um, it's not necessarily that like Phil Jackson improved their team and took them to a championship caliber level. I think it's honestly just like, not to discredit Phil, but the Pistons started getting older and breaking down right when like Scottie Pippen came into his prime, and so it was kind of like essentially it was more the players than the coaching. Like I think Phil Jackson, let's say the difference between him and the 89 to 90 season to the 90 to 91 season. So um 89 to 90 they lose in the conference finals, but they still were a 55 win team, like really good, third in the East. But then next season they win 6 more games, so that is an improvement, but still in the same range of wins. And then they get to the finals and win it. But like let's look at the correlations here. Isaiah Thomas and those boys start getting older and a bit more beat up after 3 consecutive finals trips. As far as like them facing the Lakers in the finals, you have Magic still in his prime. He was the MVP this season, but you have a much different supporting cast around him. You still have Byron Scott and James Worthy, but basically everybody else is gone. AC Green is gone, or I can't remember if he was still there or not, but he was definitely not the same player that he was, let's say, 5 years earlier. Kareem is gone, and you have Vlade Divac in his replacement as like an okay center, not great, but basically you have a Lakers team that's significantly worse than what we remember. This was not Showtime Lakers. This was Magic Johnson trying to pull a rabbit out of his hat and win a finals with an okay supporting cast. I would like, okay, let's see here. How would I make a comparison. Like the 91 Lakers that the Bulls beat, that's like the 2014 Heat that got blown out of the water by the Spurs. Like you had LeBron, you had Magic, those two still played brilliantly in each of their respective series, but like not really much around them. Like James Worthy was okay. Like James Worthy was James Worthy for the Lakers, but really nobody else was that great. And then uh, for the Heat, you had Wade and Bosch, and they were playing pretty mediocre for themselves. So what my point in breaking down all of this is that like the Bulls run, yes, they got a lot better, and Jordan is the GOAT, and he helped them um, get over the hump and win. But like it also lined up really well with just their team development. Like Scottie Pippen became a perennial All-Star at the same time that these teams, like the Pistons, were getting worse and the Lakers were getting worse. And you saw like um, let's see here. You had Horace Grant, who was just like improving after his rookie season and becoming a solid player, and that just happened to correlate with like the time that Phil Jackson took over. But like I think that you keep Doug Collins in there instead of Phil Jackson, they probably still three-peat. Like they never were really that challenged in any of these series. They beat the Lakers 4-1 in the finals. They beat the Trailblazers 4-2. They beat the Suns 4-2. But it's like I think that Jordan still could have won those series without Phil Jackson. And one time somebody asked like Michael Jordan, "What's the key to the triangle offense?" Kind of like trying to get some insight on strategy, and Michael just said, "I don't know. I'm the triangle." And he was like basically flippant and saying like, this triangle BS and you're trying to act like it's all Phil Jackson, but it's really just me. And I basically agree with him. I think like yeah, you take Phil Jackson off of that team and you put on any coach. Like let's say you even put on David Blatt onto that team. They probably are still like a 60 win team and win the finals because they had MJ and they had Scotty and they had Horace Grant. Like okay, let's move off of Phil Jackson on the Bulls and let's even go to the Lakers now and say like was he really that great of a coach on them? I will tend to say that he did all right for the Lakers. Obviously, he won 5 chips, but you look at okay, so let's say you look at the 80 okay, so the 98 to 99 season, they're 31 and 19. If you adjust that, that's like a 49 win team, I'm pretty sure, to like a regular if you adjust that to let's say regular season length instead of 50 games, I can do the calculation here really quick. That would be the equivalent of being a 51 win team. So let's say in that lockout shortened season with Del Harris still as head coach, they're a 51 win team. They get to the second round and get swept by the Spurs because the Spurs had the Twin Towers, Tim Duncan and David Robinson. But then you look at the correlations of this. This next season, Phil Jackson takes over. They win 67 games and they win the finals, and then they go on to win 2 more finals. But look, I want to look at Kobe Bryant quick and look at his player development over the years. So you take him in 98 to 99, the season before Phil Jackson gets there. Kobe's averaging less than 20 points a game. He's averaging, the same pretty similar numbers as far as rebounds and assists, 6 and 5, and then steals, he's right around his between 1.5 and 2, and then blocks, he actually set a career high this season at 1. But field goal percentage the same, but then you see the next season he jumps up his scoring average from it was 19.9 and it goes up 3 points to around 22 and a half to 23 a game. So his scoring average jumps up. He maintains all of his shooting splits, so he's still essentially the same player. Um, but just basically, you see him take a slight step forward, and it's his second All-Star appearance in this season because in '98 they kind of unfairly said like, oh, we want to see Kobe versus Jordan, so they put Kobe in. But you see, the season that Phil Jackson takes over is the first season that Kobe Bryant is an All-Star, or like a real All-Star, I'm gonna say. And then after that, you see Kobe and Shaq both in their primes, and they win 3 straight. But it's like, yes, but they had Kobe and Shaq in their primes. So like, um, now the Lakers is more tricky because they had more like difficult seasons of winning. Like, do they beat the Blazers in the conference finals if they don't have Phil Jackson? You could argue no. Or like in 2002, do they beat the Kings in the conference finals with Phil Jackson? Again, you could argue no, but I would say like at worst Um, this team, the Lakers, like in that first three-peat, do they win? Do they win as many without Phil Jackson? I'd argue they win a minimum of two even without him because you still got Shaq and Kobe in their primes, and they're gonna be fine without him. Like you put in any replacement. Like I think if Del Harris would have remained the head coach on that team, they still would have probably won the title the next year. They still would have developed because again, you see some patterns here. The Jazz are deteriorating, and who were the big bullies in the West when the Lakers were failing a lot? The Jazz. They lost in a sweep to the Jazz in '98, and the Jazz were still like in the playoff mix between 99 to around 2002. But then you saw like Karl Malone and John Stockton decline a lot. You saw teams who were still pretty good in the late 90s, like the Sonics, decline a lot. Gary Payton started to decline a bit. What are some other things here? You see, well, the Trailblazers had their best season, but you see other teams like who was really the competition to the Lakers in the West at this time? The Suns were gone at this point. Charles Barkley was gone. You saw the Rockets start to really decline. You know, you had Hakeem going downhill. You had Charles Barkley in his last season on his last legs. By this time, actually, Scottie Pippen was gone off the Rockets. So in '98 to '99, they had Scottie Pippen, Barkley, and Hakeem, and so. But then you see a correlation that he goes off of the Rockets, and then the next season the Rockets kind of fall off as a team. But that's when the Lakers rise. Like, but I think we attribute like the success of this team to like, oh, Phil Jackson came in, boom, they're a winner. But in reality, like you had like three perennial playoff teams that fell off significantly the year that the Lakers started to become like a really good team. Um, and like I don't think it's by coincidence that they won a title. Like I don't think it's like, oh, Phil Jackson comes in, he waves his magic wand of coaching, bada bing, bada boom, they're a title winner. I don't think that's the case. I think that they just happen to improve. Um, or like I think that the development of the players along with the competition just made a mix that it was like the time that the Lakers were going to start improving their team. Let's see here. As far as coaches that I think did a really good job of coaching, because I feel like I've been really one-sided here. Like, let's take the Orlando Magic in '99 to 2000. Doc Rivers is coaching the team. They're supposed to tank and be the worst team in the NBA, essentially. Their best player this year was Darrell Armstrong, who, if you don't know much about him for his career, I think he averaged like 9 or 10 points a game. This season, he shot 43% from the field. He averaged 16 points a game. He was their leading scorer. Their second best scorer, Ron Mercer, who, if you know anything about Ron Mercer, really not a scorer for much of his career, maybe like 10 points a game, but he played only 31 games, and he was their second best scorer at 15 points a game. Besides that, they had nothing on this team. Like they had a really young Ben Wallace at 25, who was averaging 5 points a game and 8 rebounds and a little less than 2 blocks a game, but he really wasn't giving them much. And then they had Bo Outlaw, who was playing around 30 minutes a night, averaging 6 points. You had Tariq Abdul-Wahad, who I'd never even heard of before, averaging 12 points a night. Only played 46 games though, shot 43% from the field. You had nobody who was taking significant shots, who was a good shooter even. Like Bo Outlaw, he was only taking 4 shots a night, but like Ron Mercer shot 40% from the field. As I said, Tariq and Darrell Armstrong both shot 43%. Chris Gatling, who took 10 shots a night, was shooting 45%. You only had the only guys shooting well were Bo Outlaw taking 4 shots a night, Ben Wallace taking 4 shots a night. So not a good team. So they really should have been about like a 15-win team, and this team won 41 games. It's astonishing. I don't know how he did it. Doc Rivers won Coach of the Year for it. They just were their whole motto was like, excuse me, heart and hustle, and that's what they were. They just hustled and grinded out games and won them somehow. Um, that is a coach to me, a guy who elevates his players, but he turns nothing into something. Whereas I feel like, let's take those Los Angeles Lakers of the year 2000. What's their ceiling? What they did. They win a championship. But what's the floor of that team? I'd probably still say like 60 wins and like losing in the conference finals, which I know it's kind of disappointing for that team, but like still a 60-win team. What's the floor of that Chicago Bulls team in the early '90s or in the second three-peat? I'd definitely say the floor was still winning the championship. I could not have seen them losing any of those championships in any way whatsoever. Um, Now, a guy like Greg Popovich, I'd say, is like sort of an exception to the rule. I think he's a pretty good blend of both, like good coaching and good players. So you see him, he, is always like between 50 and 60 wins, if not more, and he has the 5 chips. I'd say like in '99, that was sort of a gimme championship going up against the let's see here. The Knicks, I think, were 27 and 23 when they faced them in the finals, which is the equivalent of facing like a 44 win team in the finals. Whereas I think the Spurs were like if you adjust it, they're like a 55 win team that season. And again, they have the Twin Towers going up against a Knicks team that didn't even have Patrick Ewing, their best player. So I think that's sort of a gimme title, so I'm not even going to count that really. But then you look at 2003, they won that pretty fair and square. But again, they faced really weak competition in the Nets. So do I think that they win that title even without Popovich? Yes. 2005, I'm going to say that they don't win that title without Popovich. 7-game series against the Pistons. I think that Popovich made some key decisions there that won them the title. '07 against the Cavs when they swept them. I'd say that they definitely win that title without Popovich. Um, and then 2014, I'd say that they probably still do win. Well, no. That season, I think that they win that. They win it probably in like 7 games without Popovich, but I think they won it so dominantly because of his free-flowing offensive system. But again, like I think Popovich did a great job of coaching, and he won them a lot of games and is winning them a lot of games, and they improved a lot because he was there, and players benefited from him being there. But again, even without Popovich there, you have starting off David Robinson, Hall of Famer, one of the top 5 to 6 centers of all time. You have Tim Duncan there, power forward center who is a top 10 player of all time. You have then Manu Ginobili, an all-star, and then you have Tony Parker, perennial all-star, borderline Hall of Famer. You've got those guys even without Greg Popovich. You'd have them, and I think you'd still probably the Spurs. I think at a minimum would have 3 championships without Pop. Even without him, I'm willing to say it. You put like David Black coaching that team, who's like to me not a very good head coach. They still win probably 3 titles minimum over that stretch of time. So my point in this whole video is not to bash coaches because I think they're definitely necessary. They definitely can improve a team. Definitely are useful to a team and can elevate the level of play. But I think we overhype a lot of coaches. Another one that I would like to bring up is Steve Kerr. Sorry, just go on a quick tangent. I think if they keep Mark Jackson over that time period, they still win. Like they've won 3 championships. I think they win like a minimum of 2, probably 3, like likely still 3 championships, possibly even 4, depending on how the 2016 finals works out. My point being that I think a lot of times we're like we say, "Oh, this head coach is great," but then we forget like, "Oh yeah, they had like multiple Hall of Famers on their team," and it's probably more likely that they had Hall of Famers than that they were like this brilliant uh, strategist. Because I think like for teams like those 2014 to 18 Cavs, like they still get to the finals without a head coach. I think for those '90s Bulls, they still win 6 championships without a head coach. I think that head coaching is definitely overrated in the NBA. And if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. I'm sure lots of people might disagree, but that's just the way I feel. Again, hope you guys enjoyed the video and have a good day. Bye.